The defenses against a cyber attack will continue to be tested and the inevitable will happen. It's not if, but when a data breach or theft occurs. With that, I will turn it over to our first speaker for today, Tim Riley, CEO at Zetaset. Tim, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Martina. Good morning, everyone. This is Tim Riley. I'm the CEO over at Zetaset, and with me today is Maxim Yankowski. He's our VP of Engineering.
Good morning.
Very, very briefly on us. We've both been in the cybersecurity area for at least 20 years of some level.
25 years, yep.
Had an opportunity during that time to see the evolution of and importance of various cybersecurity tools, features, and the importance has never been greater for encryption than it is now. I think it's a topic that's everywhere in the news and important across all aspects of data information, regardless of the vertical, but specific to healthcare and PHI, this more than ever, I believe, is critical. Whether HIPAA may have it as a defined requirement, it's a necessity that can't be ignored. So here, I think we need to take this step right away. Look at security as not an afterthought, because right now I think for most folks out there, it doesn't even specific to healthcare. It's a bad idea. It's an afterthought, and once the data is part of your everyday operations, you're leveraging it, you're utilizing it for your patients, extracting value for operations, and suddenly compliance comes in and says, okay, before we take another step, we have to have some level of compliance and have data protection. Data protection in its various forms, whether that be passwords, access controls, monitoring, logging, those are all extremely important. Those are legs of a stool that must be in there from a foundational aspect, and everyone does put those in initially. But what they don't seem to do all the time is put in encryption, and it does tend to be the last line of defense. From there, you need to understand that there are certain drivers that cause people to be able to access your data, and bad actors get a hold of that. I'll give you the best example from a fortress standpoint. The castle has walls, the castle has a moat, the castle has towers, it's got guards, but what happens if you get in? If you get in, the only thing stopping you from getting to the gold might be a key, and in this case, it's an encryption key. So encrypting the gold, the treasure, the IP, the PHI, that is integral to the whole security solution, and I just want people to understand protecting your secrets and your passwords, there's more to it. You actually have to protect the data, okay? I'm not going to get into too much detail right now about us because we'll talk about it as we walk through, but overall, we view encryption as let's make it as simple as possible for everyone out there. I guarantee all the listeners right now are not cryptographic experts, and right away, Zetaset views the world as let's make it a one-click solution for you. If we can take away the complexity, take away the concerns and intimidation that comes with this software so that anyone can do it, as Maxim likes to say, why wouldn't you? If we make it that easy, it's as easy as a password, so why not use it? If we can do it for you, and we can do it anywhere because it's software, as you have data spin up, it doesn't matter the environment, we follow it and encrypt it, whether it's data at rest or in motion. Again, why wouldn't you do it? Whether it's in your data center, in your cloud, out on the edge, virtual, physical. When you're software, you can go anywhere, and if you put the encryption at the right place in your operating system, you'll minimally, if not near zero, impact on performance, which is what we have there. And obviously, being software, you can scale geographically, remotely. So all these together make what I would say is a cutting new edge product that allows encryption for data anywhere at any time. So good stuff. We're very excited about it. I'm not going to belay the point. I think the whole reason we're here and we're on this call is some of these stats, which probably most of you on here don't want to see anymore, understand its importance and understand the ramifications of it if there is a breach and the reporting requirements to OCR. But it's never bad just to show, reinforce how bad it is out there. And for specific to the healthcare industry, I think we all see look at the various aspects of where the data is coming from, where it could be stored. There's so many different vessels where data could be, the PHI data. So how do we encrypt and protect in all those different environments? And it is tough. There's so much exposure that the risk is high, and it is tough to grab every piece, protect every piece, and know that you've avoided a bad actor getting access. Thus, that's the reason there's more than just one leg of a security stool. This, I think, is astounding to me, that if the last 2 years, 90% of the data in the world has been created. Mind you, it comes in different forms, whether that be, as you can see on the right, and it can be sensors, it can be social, it can be data that needs to be encrypted. So at all levels, there is some level of data incorporated in each one of those pieces of data that's growing exponentially. Again, we give you the ability to encrypt it all and do it without performance impact. So why wouldn't you? Just give yourself peace of mind and encrypt everything. Ultimately, you can see 175 zettabytes. That's an enormous amount of data, and that's only 5 years away. The high value to anyone, whether that be criminal, individual in a basement, a bad actor, a rogue state, which we know there seems to be quite a few more of those after us these days, we need to encrypt. So that's the importance of it. IBM did this great study that quantified it. Again, I'm not going to point to anything more than that it's 4 million for the average data breach. They're going to increase, and we have these new technologies we're embracing. Some of them are called DevOps, and we'll get into that in a second. But that is, I think the crux of the issue is the digital transformation, which is taking all this data and leveraging new technologies to give us more value. There's the issue. At its crux, how do we stop these new technologies that are so beneficial to us from also creating additional attack vectors? And if they're going to create additional attack vectors, which they do, how do we protect in these new places? And this is supposed to be, I always like this slide because it's supposed to be complex. I want you to think it's too busy, because that's exactly what the digital transformation is. Look at the left side. That is a preponderance of the major healthcare providers and their legacy databases, their legacy infrastructure. You can see how it's all siloed, and there's this new digital transformation that says, all right, let's see if we can consolidate, we can extract value in different ways, use new technologies and methodologies, whether that be leveraging cloud infrastructures or the new agile, the DevOps system, which is constant innovation, constant development in that infinity circle there. Well, that's a headache. If you look at all this, how many different spots, you don't even have to be a cybersecurity expert to think, look at all the different potential attack breaches that you have in there. Well, you can embrace this great new trend in technology, but you better understand, keep security in mind, and if you've already started down this process, we need you to get security implemented now. And with our technology being software, you're able to do that on existing infrastructure. And to ram this point home, look at this. The greater and quicker you want to embrace the digital transformation, it's a disruptor. It's great for you. You see the value, but at the same time, you're more likely to have a breach. So make sure you incorporate security into these new technologies. And if you haven't, like I said, make sure you take a breath and start incorporating it. So I'm going to hand it off to Maxim right here, because if there's anyone that understands the importance of the top 3 items to protecting your data, it's him. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Yes, so the key point about protecting the data is that you have to start at the source. The moment the data is created, the moment the data is put in the system, it needs to be encrypted. Because as Tim mentioned, encryption is the last line of defense, and it's a very important one. So once the data is originated, it needs to be encrypted. Once the data is stored, it needs to be encrypted at rest. As the data is transmitted, it needs to be encrypted in motion. And not the least importance is that all access and all manipulation of the data must be logged. The log must be monitored, and there should be an event reporting and reaction to different kinds of events that may occur during the data lifecycle. Because I don't think there is a question that a bad actor will get into your system. I think the question is what kind of damage the bad actor will inflict onto the system.
Mm-hmm.
So with digital transformations, with environments getting more powerful, more virtual, more multi-tenant essentially, what's going to happen is that sensitive information is going to be proliferated in different environments in large sizes, and essentially the information is all over the place. It's the most prized business commodity. It's what they derive the intelligence from, and then obviously they're going to use it in all environments and all applications they have access to derive that business intelligence and to produce the business value. So it's no secret to anyone that companies use personally identified healthcare-related information to derive intelligence, to drive more customers, and as they use more of this information and more of these environments, it puts the information at that greater risk. Whether it's in the cloud, whether it's in big data analytics environment, IoT, containers, doesn't matter. A lot of people will use that sensitive information, but unfortunately only about a third of them understand that the information needs to be encrypted and that information needs to be secured. So one of the reasons we're here is that we're trying to lift that 33% number to a higher number. We're going to create more awareness in the market. We're talking to you because we want you to understand that encryption really gives you unprecedented power and control over your data. So encryption is not new. It's been around for quite some time, and for some reason we've always seen encryption adoption to be somewhat difficult. So if encryption is the answer to a lot of your security questions, and if it's so important and the data is so sensitive, then why aren't people encrypting? Why aren't enterprises choosing to deploy encryption as their last line of defense? Historically, encryption has been somewhat difficult to deploy. It's introduced performance impacts and latency into the systems, and I'm sure you're aware that doctors in hospitals or especially urgent care, they cannot add even a minute of processing time to their workday or to their patient appointment. Everything pretty much runs on the clock, and it has to be to the second. So system performance and latency is obviously super critical. Also, as healthcare providers, you don't necessarily want to have security experts as part of your staff. You don't necessarily want to train your people to be security experts or to expose them to a lot of security concerns. What you want to have is a solution that's transparent and that can enforce security and encryption policies automatically. Of course, more data goes to the cloud. Some data still remains on-premise. That's why we have hybrid environments. But how do legacy encryption solutions support that? As we go to the cloud, environments need to scale. Key management becomes paramount because if you run 2 servers or if you run 2 large monolithic applications, that's one exercise. If you're running 5,000 containers in an environment, then key management becomes that great of a concern, and it's not simple. And also, how do you integrate with other third-party tools that provide you additional level of security? Firewalls, additional key managers, and so on and so forth. So those are the hurdles that we've identified, and as Zeta said, we've actually gone to a great extent to address all of those. In the following slides, you'll see how we do this, but as Tim mentioned before, one of our taglines is making encryption so simple, there's really no excuse for not deploying that.
So these are some of the value props that we don't need to get into right now. I know the slides will be available at some point after this webinar, but I think we will pride ourselves on what we've kind of been hitting on, that there is performance. Encryption with the cryptographic calculations of encrypt, decrypt to get the key, they're going to slow your processes down. The question is, can you minimize that? And that's what our technology has done. And that's why we like to say near zero performance impact. So that's one we like to stand very proud of, and the fact it's also transparent. If you're transparent, then everyone is allowed to be able to use this a little easier. Whomever might be your user in any use case you guys might have, they're not going to have issues with seeing this in front of them. They're just going to see data. They're not going to know behind the scenes that it was decrypted, you were authorized, decrypted, and it's just been presented to you. So the magic happens behind the scenes, and there is no interruption of business operations or performance impact. Your user is just happy to see his data as quickly as he can. The way we have priced it and done it on a total cost of ownership, we've been able to minimize additional resources that might need to be invested. It's deployable by software anywhere. You can do data in place. If you're familiar with that, that just means that if you have an existing data center, you just point and click our encryption software, and it will then encrypt the data that's there. You don't have to do a backup and restore like other things, so that will also save you quite a bit for installation rollouts. And I do think that for the purposes of the far right, this one is very relevant, and to the HIMSS membership, that we can provide that next level of compliance and security and let's just say comfort, and avoid those OCR fees and everything that comes with being plastered on the wall of shame, as some of us call it. Anyway, we can help provide some level of safe harbor for you guys. I think we should be able to help you there. As far as scalability, again, you don't have to fly around. It is something that you can deploy from one place to remote locations. So a great package. We're really excited. I think in the healthcare industry as a whole, it can really benefit from what we provide. This is, we like this little pyramid because I think in every infrastructure that healthcare may have, there's some combination, if not all of these factors involved. Let's just look at the pyramid in the middle. There's the core. There's your data center, your brick and mortar, and most everyone will have those hardware infrastructure vendors, IBM, HP, Dell, or NetApp. Well, we have encryption solutions that fit well with their storage provider. And if you go virtual, with the VMware and the vSphere, or for instance, now we go all the way up into the container worlds and Kubernetes, those new but great buzzwords, but again, they're new technologies that have plenty of new holes. We're able to use our more current and cutting-edge encryption products to secure you there as well, because you will hold data in containers. There will be data within Kubernetes environments. There will be data in VMs, and in all instances, we have encryption products that can help you. We'll now expand that out to the left. You're going to the edge, which we all know is the sensors and devices at some point have to accumulate all that data, and they'll bring it back to the likes of HPE IoT Gateway, and it's at that point we can encrypt your data. If it goes out to the cloud, and like most, you probably have a multi-cloud, and there's multi-tenant within those clouds. So protecting your data becomes more than just leveraging one cloud-native infrastructure. AWS may have some encryption, great, but what if you have AWS and you have Azure? Well, how do you have a consistent encryption policy and you have data on-prem? Well, all of a sudden you have three different ones. Well, with us, you can have one consistent one, and the encryption is universal. So we solve a lot of those problems and enjoy the automation that comes with not having multiple environments with multiple encryption policies, and that's what we help out with. And our products are here. I don't want to spend too much time, but just at this, I'll let Maxim run with this. The high level I will say is legacy products, which probably address a good majority of HIMSS users as it stands right now, whether it be full disk, the archive, and object. I think those three are a great bundle, or an individual one that you can use. Maxim will talk about it in a second. Or the new DevOps ones that some of you may be using as new initiatives. So we have you covered in whichever one you have, and back to that initial very busy slide that was the digital transformation, we've got you covered on both sides. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we do have you covered in both legacy traditional data center environments as well as more modern DevOps environments, on-prem, in the cloud, or any sort of hybrid environments. And what we've done with what we call the Xscript core components is we build a set of technologies that are adapted to all of those environments, and we build them in a way that, first of all, don't introduce any performance penalty. Second of all, it doesn't require you to change your business processes, doesn't require you to do things differently in the encrypted environment. In fact, you operate with an encrypted system in the exact same way, using the exact same set of tools, exact same set of commands, and exact same set of user processes as you operate with a non-encrypted system. So the users really don't see a difference, but your environment is secure and your data is protected. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper on one of the products.
Yeah, and I think this one, for the audience out there, this one is probably one of the more relevant and important products that we've seen in the healthcare industry with our customers so far. At its core, we just need to protect your data. And your alternatives at this point for encryption are very few at the data center. You have end user, whether they be laptop, device, sensor, phone, desktop. So you have those encryption type of vendors, and I believe some of your members have heard them. But when it comes back, all that data has to come back to a data center at some point, and you have to protect it. And I think the next two products as a bundle we've used in some of our customers' solutions, and they seem to be well received, and impact on the resources are minimal based on, we all know we have limited budgets for IT, and hiring new resources can be a challenge. You'd rather invest in the technology, and the technology here will be able to allow, you'll be able to avoid that extra resource. So if you want to jump in on it, go ahead.
Yeah, so the goal is encrypt everything. Don't spend too much time worrying about whether the information is sensitive or not. Most of the information is sensitive, even if it's not in and of itself. Then in the context of other information that could potentially be compromised, information becomes more sensitive. So this product is great because it's applicable to a variety of environments, doesn't introduce performance overhead, and includes a complete solution, or rather is a complete solution for encrypting data at rest. It includes all the components which are required to encrypt data and on any server and in any environments. When looking,
I just want to say this is an extremely important slide for all of you to understand, simply because, and we'll walk through it, it details where you can encrypt, whether it's hardware or software, and the other options that are out there that we may get questions on along the lines of why don't we do this versus this. So go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the question we hear actually most often in different kinds of enterprises and different kind of verticals, not only healthcare, as to self-encrypting drives have been developed some time ago. They allow for completely transparent encryption. Nobody worries about what encryption is, what it's like to operate it. You simply take a self-encrypting drive, insert it into a server, and quote-unquote call it a day, and your data is suddenly protected. Well, the truth about self-encrypting drives, it actually not that suitable for large-scale applications. Yes, if you have a laptop, and a lot of laptops comes with an ability to be deployed with self-encrypting drives, that's a great solution, but again, it's on a scale of one drive deployment. If you have a data center with multiple servers and multiple drives within every server, then suddenly, how do you manage the keys for the self-encrypting drives? How do you create an encryption that's granular enough that the key is not shared, that if part of the environment is compromised, not the entire environment goes into the compromised mode? And so that's why self-encrypting drives are not really appropriate for large-scale data center deployments. And as you go up the stack from self-encrypting drives to file system encryption, to database encryption, and to application-level encryption, some vendors would have you believe that application-level encryption is the best in the world because, well, it allows you for the greater granularity. You can only encrypt what you need, and you can maintain very tight access control to the encrypted information. However, that comes at a price. As you go up the stack, as you go through file system, database, and application, you pay more and more penalty in terms of application runtime. Your user experience degrades, and you also lose transparency. So therefore, we found that being kind of in the middle of a software stack, being inside the file system, and running our full disk software actually gives you the greatest benefit of being close enough to the environment that you can actually understand what the environment is, whether it's a database or a containerized environment or a disk in a server. But it also runs on a scale where it doesn't introduce any performance impact or doesn't make your environment non-transparent. So the key point here is very simple to deploy and use the environment to your greatest benefit with automatic key management, but don't use the self-encrypting drives because these just not scale with an environment.
Yeah, and just to circle and bring it all back around, I view us in the position of Goldilocks in the sense of beneath us you have a self-encrypting drive, which for some cases may be a check-the-box item for you, but there are security issues. There is no intelligence. You can't really take the key off and rotate it, which in and of itself is a more prudent policy with security. And on the top side, if you did file level encryption, which is a little bit more granular, most don't need that level. Most, you just encrypt everything. So, but if you do that to that level, you're going to slow down your performance significantly. And then, as Maxim said, go up that little cake stack on the left, up to the left, and you'll see slow, slow, slower. So, yes, we understand some environments may need that granular level encryption, but what we've seen so far is the majority of folks don't. They just need blanket encryption, but with some intelligence and with some level of a key manager. And we have one ourselves, and if you like it, great. If you need to use an existing incumbent, we work well with them as well. So we have end users that use both. Use a third-party key manager with our crypto, or you can use our full package. We can get into that a little later, but I just wanted to drive home that this is where we fit in the Goldilocks, and we're able to minimize performance impact.
So as the data resides on encrypted drives or on the drives that are protected by software-based encryption, they usually travel in different forms. And as we talked about encrypting data in the application, that comes with performance penalties, but sometimes you need to transfer the data off of the application and put it on the backup media. And that's where Xcrypt Archive is going to come in and help. It's an application that, with high performance, is able to create encrypted archives of files, directories, use it with enterprise-grade encryption that is also protecting your encrypted data with manipulation post-encryption, and provides for simple integration with third-party key managers or hardware security modules for larger scale organizations. So that's your one-stop encrypted backup solution. That's entirely software.
Now, one thing that I know it's hard to understand this because we have gotten a little technical, but at a high level, even for myself, when I heard it, for lack of a better way of saying it, it was pretty cool. It's one thing to encrypt. It's another thing to use that third bullet point, AES GCM, Galois counter mode. Ooh, big words. But what it does is it will search and see if there's been any manipulation done on something that's been encrypted. And if it sees anything, it knows it might have been compromised, and it flags it, and then you won't have that as part of your data set. So it's a newer technology that's embraced, and we've incorporated it into our product. So again, under the pretty cool factor. And I'll let Maxim talk to this, but this is a normal use case that we have seen with some of our healthcare providers. As you use our full disk, you can see the one that Maxim just went over, and the archive that we just spoke to. And in this case, we partnered with Greenplum Database, which is a Dell EMC company, which was then called part of Pivotal, if you're familiar with them, and Pivotal just was acquired by VMware. And in the same instance, if you have to store it into the cloud, we also have an AWS encryption product. So across all three, you can have consistent encryption policy.
And by the way, this is a typical environment. The enterprise environment is never uniformed. Yeah. It's never one server in a closet. It's never even 10 servers in a large data center. It's always all over the place. You have the database, you have the application environment, you have backups in the cloud, you have encrypted backups that you need to generate. And so this suite of solutions that we're talking about that comprise of the Xcrypt full disk and Xcrypt cloud encryption, that suite of solutions allow you to deploy and encrypt all of the information wherever the information is.
Yeah, I mean, you can call this either a private cloud solution, on-prem, private cloud, some kind of hybrid, but this is one that we've seen more than once. Okay.
So Amazon is definitely making great strides and making their user experience or their customer experience is to the level where there's really very little reason not to be tempted to put your data in the cloud. But then as you put your data in the cloud, you essentially trust your cloud provider with your data, and by extension, you trust your patient's data to the cloud provider. And so when we come in, we usually say, okay, fine, if you trust your data to the cloud, at least don't trust your keys to the cloud provider. Because if you install an elaborate security system at your house, but you keep your key under the doormat, then that's not a good security system. It actually doesn't matter what security system it is. So that's why we created a product that's called Encrypt Object. And the idea is, like we said, encrypt the data at the origination point at the enterprise before it ever goes to the cloud, but also keep the keys on-prem. It's a product that contrasts very well with whatever solutions Amazon is giving you, whether it's encrypting data already in the cloud using their key management provider. It's essentially what I just said. Don't do this, don't store the data, and don't give them the keys at the same time. Even themselves, they understand it, so they've created an encryption client that you can deploy on your on-prem, and then encrypt data before it lives in the cloud. But the key point here is that the key manager and the encryption keys are still in the cloud. And that's why we created, as I said, Encrypt Cloud product that essentially allows you to encrypt the data before it goes to the cloud, but also keep the keys on-prem and outside of the cloud provider control.
And essentially, looking at those three boxes on the right, you either rely on Amazon for everything. Amazon in the middle will at least still manage the keys, but you do the encryption. And finally, on the right, you take care of everything, and all Amazon gets is in your encrypted data. They can't decrypt it. They don't manage the keys. It's all under your ownership, which is known as client-side encryption on the far right. On the far left, server-side encryption is when your cloud provider does everything for you. And some will be okay with that, but we would hope most won't be, because that's not good best practice for cybersecurity.
So with all the big talk that Amazon is running about protecting your data and taking your data security seriously, one thing they don't talk about as often, but they should, and something you should be aware of, is the concept of shared responsibility. They essentially say, we'll store your data, but the security of your data is your responsibility. Well, which is great, but then look at the number of attacks that happened on the Amazon environments and S3 buckets that were in the Amazon cloud. So that's where our product allows you to essentially draw a secure perimeter around your enterprise and redirect all Amazon traffic to a single endpoint that we provide. That endpoint will look and feel exactly like the Amazon's endpoint, except that before the data leaves your enterprise, it's encrypted. It will never leave your enterprise unencrypted. It will never be prone to these attacks where improperly set permissions on S3 buckets will leak the data.
So there you can see that's between those three that we just went over, the full disk, the archive, and AWS, you really do have a consistent encryption product across all the different environments. Now, let's extend it out the other way just a little bit. I think this is a fairly safe stat that we all know about, that it's going to happen. The IoT breaches have already happened, and they will continue. So how can Zetaset help you? And essentially what we can do here is, if you look on the right side there on the graphic, on the left are plenty of the edge devices, which I'm sure are pervasive everywhere in hospitals. What happens is once that data gets accumulated somewhere, and it usually doesn't go directly back to a data center. There is an aggregation point called an IoT field gateway. Well, there doesn't have a robust data encryption on that. It is a bit scary to say that. So we partnered with HPE and provided that for them. And as you can see, that's in the middle. And then once that data is there, it is going to be transmitted back to a data center. So once all that sensor data hits that gateway, we've got you covered throughout the rest of your data's journey, wherever it might go. Once it's transmitted, again, we have keys. You control the keys. And it goes wherever it wants to. So you can see why HP really was excited that we were able to provide this and do it again. If you want to use someone else's key manager, you don't have to use ours. Just use our crypto products, and we'll be very happy. Okay. I will say one thing on this and let Maxim, because most don't know, but Maxim was one of the initial people at a company that made and designed one of the first key managers ever back in the early 2000s. So he and quite a few other the team over here know about the shortcomings, why we need key managers, and it's telling that the same reasons haven't really changed over the last 20 years. It's surprising, unfortunate, but it's a reality. So whether, again, you use Zetaset or someone else, it really is important because everyone just hears encryption and says, great, I got it. Well, how do you encrypt? You encrypt with the key. You decrypt with the key. So what do you do with that key? Well, that's where a key manager comes in. And it doesn't have to be sophisticated. You don't need a one that you can get away with a Camry. You don't need the Lexus. You can get away with something less. Maybe you need the tricked out version. That's fine. But for most, we've seen, the key manager you need is just enough to rotate keys, delete keys, and then we add on top of it our secret sauce and our administration and policies. So between all of these, again, this is the leg of the stool piece. We'd love you to use our key manager, but if you don't, that's great. We work with everyone else's. So Maxim, without going too deep on these, give a couple examples of why this is important.
Yeah, so key management, as Tim said, encryption is really easy. Taking a piece of data and converting it to a piece of what's called ciphertext, which is essentially applying the encryption transformation, is a reasonably easy operation. It's been figured out, it's been structured, it's been implemented, but every one of these operations requires the key. And so encryption requires a key, decryption requires a key. Every time the operation takes place, you need to provide a key. That's why there's all these software components or even hardware components that are called key management or key management appliances. Those are responsible, and you want them to be there. You don't want to have to worry about them, but you want to know that they are ready to process whatever number of keys your environment generates. As Tim said, we've designed quite a few key managers, some of them enterprise-grade, some of them are simplified software solutions which are still ready for the enterprise. But the key point here always is that you need the key manager to manage your keys, because it's not like having one key on the key chain. Suddenly you have millions of keys.
I would, before we leave this slide, if you look at the left graphic, look at the third point down. That is astounding to us that 41%, and this is barely a year old, are using spreadsheets and paper, a complete manual process to track keys, no key management at all. It's understandable, again, that's why we're talking, that people are not truly embracing or understanding the full what it means to have a cryptographic solution. Key management is a part of it. Again, it doesn't have to be intimidating, and we can take that first step away from an Excel or a piece of paper with our product or someone else's, okay?
So with our key manager, one thing that we built is a very simple but a key manager that's built around standards. And so as Tim mentioned, it's very secure. It's built on the KMIP compliance, which is essentially a protocol that all key managers use to talk to each other. It has its own key database that's encrypted itself. The key for the key database is stored in the security module that can be either ours in software, or it can be hardened security modules for environments that require it. The security module, we provide the software implementation of it. We're also able to integrate with any other key manager that and the PKCS 11 compliant HSM. We've integration tested with those provided by leading security vendors. And so we're going to venture in what's called the DevSecOps, which is essentially a transformation from what I want to call a legacy environment to more agile, to an environment that would allow you to drive innovation faster, to drive business value faster.
So for those not familiar, I know we have a full spectrum of audience here. DevOps is essentially taking the methodology that continuous innovation and continuous development. And what it is if new products are cranked out, they're sent out to the customer gives feedback, and there's more real-time updates. And back in the old days, it took forever. People would give input. It might be a roadmap that took 3 to 6 months to a year to give that next update. Now it's become more real-time. And it's a phenomenal thing. It's been adopted widely, and it's catching on like fire. But it does expose data because data is being used throughout that process, and it has new holes. Thus, somebody needs to protect the data, and DevSecOps has become the security philosophy around DevOps. And there's different products. Again, there's different pieces of security of data, and in this new environment, we're going to provide you the encryption.
So DevSecOps was originally invented because the digital transformation from legacy environments to specifically container environments to drive innovation, really what happened, the number of attack vectors increased dramatically. And people quickly figured out that legacy approach of let's build the system first and then put on security later, that legacy approach really does not work. And also, as part of the digital transformation, it's a unique opportunity to build in security early. That security is a number of measures. It's whatever, the encryption, the role-based access control, the policy management, and so on and so forth. But the key idea of the DevSecOps is that put in the security, think about the security as part of transformation, think about it as part of deployment and development.
Okay, so hang in there. We just want to go over some high-level things, and for those of you who have the technical background, we'll just do a couple quick slides, and then we'll get to the questions. Containers, just a new way for those of you who know it, that's been even more widely adopted. Containers is at the core. When you hear the words Kubernetes, I know that's a new one for some of you, containers, Docker, those are the new vessels that are used in this DevOps environment. So obviously the opportunity and it is to protect data that taps into the containers, that's in the containers, or the container taps into the data. Well, you can see that exchange back and forth at rest. We need to protect it. And in this study that was just done, top of mind is the security of that data. And it's driven home by what we've seen with end users and prospects ourselves, that the reason they're talking to us is that they need to encrypt data in these. Go ahead. And this slide may look as confusing as possible, but just visually take a step back, look at the left one. High, it's high, those first three columns are high, and what's going on that fourth one right there, the production one? Well, you see everybody's been using, you remember how I said it's DevOps, continuous innovation, continuous development, those are those three. But what happens is that when we go into production, there's some hesitation. And part of, if not a good chunk of the hesitation, is security. You can't put DevOps into production environments without having proper security around it. And that's where we've seen an increase, but the further adoption is going to take more security around it. The right one, I will say, it looks odd, but it's simply saying that as you start to see on the far right, the far right, that last bar, and the greater than 5,000, more people are suddenly using containers in bigger and bigger environments. So as we get into bigger and bigger environments, what does that mean? There's more attack vectors, there's more exposure points, and you definitely need to encrypt it. And if you see at the bottom there, 76% of container usage from those three verticals, tech, financial, and healthcare. So we're very excited that people are adopting the technology. At the same time, we're a little worried for you, and hopefully we can help encrypt some of that for you. I will say that I don't want to get too much. We're getting toward the end. We got about 5 minutes before we take questions, but here is a little bit more on the technologies within DevOps. Bear with it. It might be educational. We won't get in too deep.
I think the important message here is that we didn't just take legacy encryption solution and dumped it into a new containerized DevOps system. We actually took a legacy encryption solution and re-engineered it and went through the same digital transformation we're advertising that every enterprise should go through to drive more business value. So we've gone through digital transformation ourselves. We've taken encryption technology and brought it into a world of containers where all the encryption services run natively in containers, and they integrate directly into the containerized environment to provide high performance and granular encryption.
And for the high level, Docker has all those containers. You can see why they used it. Look at the little logo of it. What I've heard from Maxim and other folks is if you have more than 10 of those containers, it's really hard to manually orchestrate and manage. Well, that's where that Kubernetes comes in. It will do the management and orchestration for you. If you have 1,000 Docker containers, you can manage it with Kubernetes. Great. Well, Kubernetes is tough. Kubernetes is open source, and you've got to be pretty good with it. So the likes of Red Hat created what I consider the enterprise wrapper to make Kubernetes easy to use. That's where they came up with theirs called OpenShift. So in a nutshell, you can use this enterprise version of software to manage Kubernetes, and Kubernetes manages Docker. And we're really seeing the preponderance of deployments in DevOps environments of those three, and that's why we have products that address them in all those three environments.
So some of the advantages of our encryption solution is that those will get a little technical, but let me just go over them quickly. Unique key per volume actually means that in the multi-tenant environment, one compromised container does not compromise the entire environment. So that's a great level of protection. Container data protection means that we will not just rely on the environment on Kubernetes to protect your data. We will actually create a very relevant high-performance encryption solution. Secure data arrays, when servers go out of commission, when hard drives get replaced, when environments get decommissioned, we'll take care of not having to securely erase the data because we will securely erase the cryptographic key. If the environment is supposed to be, if suspected to be compromised, then we can quickly, with a single command, decommission any server, any node, or any worker node within the Kubernetes. And of course, the storage separation means that every container will get its own unique storage volume that is very different from a typical Kubernetes storage model where everybody is sharing every piece of storage.
And this, we got one other slide after this, but I want you to focus on this simply because this is a healthcare use case from a client. And I'll let Maxim talk to it, but this is, you can see where the exposure point is and where we protect, if you want to go ahead.
So what this slide shows is essentially a low-level depiction of Kubernetes cluster running worker nodes and running what's called the Kubernetes pods, which think of them as kind of a construct that depict your application. So you can have, as a service provider, you can have multiple applications from multiple enterprises running within the same Kubernetes cluster. They will share nodes. They will also share storage. Whatever data they share, whatever data they use will reside on the shared storage. Therefore, if one of the containers is compromised and the shared storage is not properly encrypted, the entire storage will compromise. And so data from different tenants and also data from different applications will be compromised in the same attack. We address that by encrypting every single piece of storage associated with every unique container with its own unique cryptographic key. So as we said previously, one compromised container does not compromise the entire environment, and that's the key point here.
So think about this just from, again, I'm the high-level guy when it comes to this. A pod is just a Kubernetes term for like 100 to 1,000 containers. And like Maxim said, what happens if one of those containers gets compromised through a bad actor? And then they tap data. They not only have data for Cigna in that case, they have it for Anthem and United. So how does Zetaset help there? Well, we're going to encrypt and limit what that bad actor has access to and encrypt. So data is safe from the other parties, whether that's interdepartmental, cross providers. But by doing it this way, you do mitigate the encryption or the exposure of data.
This is essentially the last line of defense that Tim was talking about previously.
Precisely. And finally, this is what it looks like in a Red Hat environment. We're great partners with them. They're wonderful. I hope all of you have the opportunity to deal with Red Hat. Their OpenShift product is it's superior to what's out there. And in the event you use it, we have a product that works with it, with Kubernetes, you can see on the right. And I would definitely look to see that on Red Hat's their marketplace. We are up there as well. We provide encryption, and you can take that down and do a demo on it if you want. Again, that's on Red Hat's marketplace. And finally, what are the takeaways here? Forever. I don't have to say it any more than that top bullet. It is connected at the hip. They're linked. Digital transformation isn't a buzzword. It'll be here forever, because forever we're going to be taking data and using it in different ways. For me, almost in tandem, just look at security as your friend, not your enemy. I think people look at it as a speed bump that they don't want to have to deal with. I don't know if you've encountered it in your own organizations, but you'll have plenty of people who have the right vision of what needs to happen, and then you'll have the resistance. And it's finding a happy marriage between the two and helping convince why it's important to have encryption. And yes, compliance is an easy hit on them, but they should also understand the overall mantra of why it's important. And Maxim has plenty to add to this because he's seen it firsthand. What would you want to add to this part?
Yeah, and I also wanted to say that, yes, security is not the enemy. Security, in fact, your friend, and as we said repeatedly, your last line of defense. It's your protector. And it's important to understand that no one technology will address all of your security challenges. Security solution is never one product. It's a combination of products and technologies that will work together to make your environment safe and secure. However, encryption is an essential tool in your security tool belt. So we would like to leave you with the thought that security is not the enemy. Encryption is your last line of defense, and we at ZetaSet created a great suite of products that help you accomplish that level of security and that level of encryption.
Okay, thanks, Maxim. That's it for us. At this point, we can turn it back over and see if we have any questions. I know it's a lot to digest, and as we said, we'll have this up for you to review at a later date. But if you have questions, feel free. Now's the time to ask.
And Tim and Maxim, I do see some questions in here. If you'd like me to read some, happy to do that.
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. So the first one I'll do is encryption. It's not mandatory for HIPAA, so why do I need to do it?
That is a question we hear a lot. I think I know we have a full spectrum of audience out there, as most would know, that HIPAA doesn't specifically say the word encryption. It does say technologies to protect. And if you ask any IT department, CISO at any level, they will tell you, regardless, encryption is a given. It's part of a solution. You can't protect data without it. If you were to say, okay, that's my technology to do that per HIPAA, you then have to make sure you implement that consistently across all of your data. Thus, if you decide to go encryption, which most do, you're then forced to do it everywhere to be compliant. It's one of those items where I think the government did it so they could say if there's a new technology above and beyond encryption, which I don't see coming anytime soon, you can implement that as well. They just didn't want to peg it to one type of technology. But I think for the majority of folks in any vertical, they understand the importance of encryption.
So this is another question that has HIPAA in there, and I hope, I'm not a tech person, so I'm not sure if you've answered this question already, but the relaxation of HIPAA standards to encourage greater use of telehealth has caused some concern. What are your thoughts about this?
That's a good question,
we just
actually.
talked about this. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit, and I think it's worth emphasizing that, part of the reason these relaxations happen is to increase the adoption of telehealth. And telehealth essentially means that, bring your own devices. Your patients can now communicate with you from the comfort of their own and safety of their own home, which is nowadays is even more important. But the relaxation of standards does not mean that you as enterprises and as healthcare providers should make it easier for hackers to break in, because don't use the opportunity for relaxed standards. Don't use that as an opportunity to be more relaxed about security and safety. So the way we view it is that when the standards actually get relaxed, you should get more concerned about information security, because hackers are essentially standing by. They're not relaxing their attack tools. They're not relaxing for the steps they take to look for new attack vectors. So why should you relax your security tools?
And I know exactly what the question pertains to. I remember, I think, when HHS did this for HIPAA back in mid-March, because they understood the speed that the healthcare providers needed to move with, and that slowing down because of security, again, back to the overall theme here, security will slow down processes. And I think the government realized that and had to lax. Now, the good thing here is we can chase it back down with you. All right? You may have had to set up that new triage. You may have had to move quickly because of all the pandemic demand. But we're able to catch up with it. If you're still just planning at a more medium term, we can be involved with that. But I think they did it for the right reasons, but we still need to educate your users, your customers, that it's important to make sure encryption is still there.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. Why not use self-encrypting drives, SEDs? They are simple and transparent.
They are simple and transparent, and as I mentioned previously in the presentation, if we're talking about securing data on a laptop, that may work. If we're talking about securing data in the data center or in the cloud or in the hybrid environment, and being able to be granular and high performance and being able to manage keys and really protect the data, not just have a checkbox, then self-contained drives are not the ones you want to go with.
Okay. I'll do one more. We've a couple of minutes left. Does your encryption technology cover emails?
So we don't cover, our encryption technology covers the data center or backend encryption. It covers email systems that run in your data center. It does not cover endpoint email encryption. So if you're looking for encryption, again, for your laptop and for email client, that's not ours.
In motion as well.
Right. So, but encryption, our encryption does cover encryption at rest and in motion.
Okay. All right, I see one more question. It's a little on the long side. Hopefully we'll have time to answer. When the goal is to improve patient care and in turn patient satisfaction, what are your thoughts about communicating the benefits of cryptology as a security control that helps defend and hopefully avoid records disclosure, theft of funds or information, critical service disruption, i.e. loss of business continuity or operating capacity, loss of life or critical services, and other bad outcomes? Promote patient care and safety information environment for healthcare providers.
Yeah, I think it's a, well, actually it's a good question. To me, it comes down to how do I communicate the importance of encryption without making everybody fall asleep, and at the same time make them understand it's paramount to the protection of PHI and to a business, to the importance of everyday operations of a company. Happy to have that conversation and presentation with someone, because it takes time. It's baby steps, and I'm sure some of you have realized that already. But I think encryption is out there. Everyone knows the iPhone is encrypted, and there's protections with it. No one knows. No one knew that the iPhone was encrypted behind the scenes until all of the most recent stuff in the last 5 years. And it's the same thing here. I think we can leverage that and say, listen, that doesn't just apply to a phone. We need to protect the data wherever it goes, and encryption is a big part of that. So don't view it as a hurdle, view it as a friend. You want to add anything to that before we finish up?
Yeah, I think the big value proposition here is that you have a tool, like we said, the tool in your tool belt that allows you to encrypt and secure the data, and your customers, your patients, they're more educated now than ever, and they know that in medicine, a lot of decision-making nowadays is based on having a lot of information at your fingertips. And so they would like to be more comfortable, and they would like to hear that you're taking care in protecting their information.
Okay. All right, we're right up at the top of the hour. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Maxim, and thank you, Zetaset, for sponsoring this webinar. Great information. And I would just like to remind our audience to complete our exit survey as you exit. And with that, we will close down for the day. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.